Hey, welcome! Today, we're going to play detective and crack the code on a number you've probably seen on your own blood test results, but maybe never really understood, the MCV. It's just one tiny number, but believe me, it tells a huge story about your health. And by the end of this, you'll know exactly what it's saying. Okay, let's just jump right in with a real-world scenario that might sound a little too familiar for some of you. You get your blood work back, you're scanning through the results, and then you see something that just doesn't add up. It's that exact situation that leaves so many people scratching their heads, wondering what their labs are really trying to tell them.
So get this. This is a real question someone posted online, and it perfectly sets up the mystery we're going to solve today. They see a number, the MCV, that's pointing towards anemia, but the usual suspect, right, iron, seems to have a perfect alibi. So what on earth is actually going on here?
And that right there is our central puzzle. A low MCV, which means you have small red blood cells, is almost always linked in our minds with iron deficiency. But what happens when the iron levels are perfectly fine? It's this exact contradiction that makes the MCV such a fascinating and critical clue for doctors.
To solve this puzzle, we have to go back to basics. We need to understand our number one piece of evidence, the MCV itself. What is it really, and what is it measuring? Let's break it down.
The MCV, or mean corpuscular volume, which I know sounds super technical, is actually really simple. It's just a measurement of the average size of your red blood cells. For a doctor who's looking into why you might be feeling tired or run down, this number is ground zero. It's the first question they need to answer. Are the cells too small, too large, or are they just right?
So this one measurement basically sorts your cells into one of three big buckets. First up, if your MCV is low, it means your cells are smaller than they should be. The technical term for this is microcytic. Just think micro for tiny. Now, if your MCV is right there in the normal range, well, your cells are the right size. We call that normocytic, normo for normal. This is what we're aiming for. This is the healthy baseline.
And finally, you guessed it, if the MCV is high, your cells are too big, or macrocytic, macro for large. So you've got micro, normocytic, and macrocytic. See? It's a really simple but incredibly powerful first step in any investigation.
So just based on that one simple measurement of size, small, normal, or large, doctors can basically create a police lineup of the usual suspects, because different types of anemia actually cause your red blood cells to change size in very specific ways.
Okay, so when the cells are small, microcytic, the number one suspect that everyone thinks of is, of course, iron deficiency anemia. But, as we saw in our little mystery, it's not the only one in the lineup. You also have other conditions, like thalassemia, which is a genetic disorder, or something called anemia of chronic disease, which is often linked to long-term inflammation. They all cause small cells.
And here's where it gets a little tricky. You can actually be anemic even when your cells are the perfect size. Weird, right? This is called normocytic anemia, and it can be caused by things like chronic kidney disease, a serious condition called aplastic anemia, where your body just isn't making enough new cells, or even from sudden blood loss. And what if the cells are too big, macrocytic? Well, that sends the investigation down a totally different path. This often points towards nutritional problems, specifically not having enough vitamin B12 or folate. Some types of liver disease can also cause these oversized red blood cells. All right, let's circle back to our original case, the person with the low MCV but normal iron. Now that we know who's in the microcytic lineup, how does a doctor figure out which one is the real culprit? Because this is the assumption that almost everyone makes. Oh, low MCV? It's got to be low iron. But a good detective and a good doctor knows you can't just jump to conclusions based on a single clue. You need more evidence. And this is how they gather that extra evidence. To tell these conditions apart, doctors look at other lab values. They'll check your ferritin, which is basically your body's iron savings account. They also look at transferrin saturation, which shows how much iron is ready to be used right now. And they might check for inflammation with a marker like C-reactive protein. Now look at the chart. For classic iron deficiency, see how ferritin is low? But for the other two, the pattern is totally different. So let's apply this to our puzzle. The person had a low MCV. But remember, their ferritin was normal. Looking back at our evidence chart, what does that tell us? It pretty much rules out simple iron deficiency right off the bat. The real cause is much more likely to be thalassemia or anemia of chronic disease. Suddenly, the mystery is starting to make sense. And this really brings us to the most important takeaway of this whole thing. The MCV is not the end of the investigation. It's not the final diagnosis. It is the critical first clue that tells the detective which trail to follow.
So this is the process in a nutshell. A doctor starts with the MCV. That lets them classify the potential anemia into one of those 3 big buckets we talked about. Then they use more specific tests, like for ferritin or B12 or inflammation, to zero in on the exact condition. And from there, they can finally pinpoint the underlying cause. It's a clean, logical process.
Ultimately, the MCV acts as this incredibly efficient sorting tool. It takes this huge, overwhelming list of possible problems and immediately narrows it down to just a few likely candidates. And that matters because it means you get the right follow-up tests and the correct treatment faster without wasting time or money on things like iron supplements you might not even need. It points the investigation exactly where it needs to go, right from the start.
So the next time you look at a blood test, don't just see a list of numbers. See them as clues. Each one, especially a fundamental clue like MCV, is part of a larger story your body is trying to tell you. The question is, are you equipped to listen? Well, now you are.